So this is David Buurma, and this is ShowUpNation Podcast, and we have a special guest here today, and it's the one and only, my father, Harry Buurma, and it's a pleasure to have you here because, you know, as time goes on, we won't always have these opportunities, and so, you know, it's one way of documenting history, time, past, knowledge, wisdom, and gather what we can, right? And we always have something we can pass down, and we always pass something down. Sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be not so good, but we're always going to pass something down to the next generation. So I want to talk to you, Dad, about the family side. You know, you've done things a little bit less orthodox as what you generally see in your culture with your sons and that kind of stuff. You got into adoption. I want to talk a little bit about that. And then a little bit, we want to talk about the last about, you know, at different age and stages of your life, as you went through, what you focused on, and how would you, you know, done it over again, what would you focus on? How would you focus it differently? Because, you know, when you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, there are different stages, right, as we go through life. And I just want to know, you know, what that looked like for you when you went through life, and what do you recommend? So on that note, I guess I have a quick question. You know, I was the youngest of six boys. And, you know, how did I fit in or not fit in? How was I different or not different than the other five boys? How was that different, or was there anything different for me? Or did you actually spend much time, you just kind of lumped them all together and it's like, here you go? What was that? What was that experience?
Yeah, that would be true, because really, my own children, they fuss over their children a lot more than I did. I was kind of just standing back. I really, really enjoyed the camaraderie of our kids. But in terms of, you know, the day-to-day, taking somebody aside, I never played baseball and never did any of the sports stuff. Yeah, the kids, I helped them to invent their own interests. We live on a farm. We are fortunate that way. Pond, just skate on in the winter. The excuse was that we had a large family. We couldn't afford to pander to everybody's personal needs. So we just, you know, like no exceptions, just everybody had to fit in, everybody. And what happened in retrospect, as I look back, you guys all kind of raised each other. You know, you just kind of everybody, you know, but my role was to make sure that things were done reasonably fairly. And if somebody stepped out of line, that was not tolerated at all. There's no bullying, none of that kind of stuff. And always invited the kids to question everything. That worked out, I feel, really good at home, but it didn't work so good at school. I really enjoyed the kids, but I could never understand why some of the teachers didn't enjoy the children like I did. And I found that it really took me a long time to figure that out. But see, they felt a freedom to question me, and I invited that. But the teachers, not so much. Some of the teachers really enjoyed our kids, and some of them not too much, because they didn't feel they needed to be questioned as to why they did this or that or whatever. So it was kind of a unique culture. Of course, we had only boys, which made it really simple and that kind of stuff.
The cucumbers, Dad.
Yep.
So we all had cucumber patches every summer.
Yep.
Why? Like, that had to be somewhat intentional?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, I was raised with cucumbers too. So that was kind of a natural. You could make some pretty good coin. And of course, learning how to make money was really relevant. To me, money was always been, like, it isn't what I've always said, and I still do, that money is one of the 5 or 10 most important things in life, but it's not the first 3 or 4, but it's really, really important. Poverty is a really bad thing, you know, like, and it's not necessary. We live in a country with, even today, that luxury and privilege and opportunity are just immense. Yeah, we have an opportunity to make money, but it's all about managing, making money and managing, but learning to enjoy to make money. You know, it was a good way of teaching kids the math of making money. The check comes in, and we share it accordingly, and that kind of thing. The older kids would get a bigger portion to do more of the work, but all those kind of things. Just anything that could make a buck. I always, whatever money you made, we put in your accounts and stuff like that. So there was kind of a joy in seeing something happening and becoming rich, eventually get to be $1,000. Wow. Can you imagine a rich guy and all that stuff. But it's that concept of just managing your money and really we didn't allow our kids to waste very much of it on their own stuff. We didn't need to. But what is really interesting since that time, in the last 30, 40 years, when the family gets together, there's one topic we never talk about, and I never understood that, but we never talk about money when we get together. We all have enough, and we never talk about it. We only ever, in society, we always talk about what we don't have. And which is interesting, but when you have enough of something, it's no big deal. And, even kids, we have lots of kids, and we don't really talk about the quantity. That's not the issue. The issue is to, just to enjoy the privileges that life has afforded us. And we all have struggles, and we share each other's struggles, and we want to, and that's what we're together for. But just for camaraderie and enjoying each other, that's the focus.
Your 6 sons, their age, I'm 41. The oldest is 50. Yeah. And then we have, as you mentioned, as we'll talk about, we have some adopted siblings. And so I guess in general, I'm curious, just in general, what would you say if you were to tell somebody else, what are you proudest about of your own sons today, right now? What would be the things that you're proud about?
Oh, the compassion that they have for society, for each other, for each other's kids. They all have enough money. Okay, that's not the issue. Am I proud about that? Yeah, I'm glad that, that was a long time ago when you guys were 23, 24 and you had lots of money, hard work. I was really proud of that at the time, but for the last 20 or 30 years, I don't care about that. It's kind of when you have enough, you have enough. It doesn't matter. The number of zeros you have in life don't matter at all, but how you care about others and you guys do care about, the people around you, and that is the part that, and your kids, of course, those are the things that I'm really, really thrilled. But also you guys always are fond of each other. And that is so fascinating to me. I've never seen kids that are as fond of each other as you guys are. Fascinating.
Yeah. And why do you think that happened?
Because you just raised each other. I was a poor parent in a way. I didn't actually model coddle you and didn't fuss over you individually, but you guys kind of looked out for each other and fought for each other and helped each other with your struggles and stuff like that.
Interesting. How about disappointments? Where's your disappointments right now?
See, in the first 20 years, you were, you learned what I learned, okay, and I shared what was new to me, and you guys, you never did what I told you to do in retrospect, but you also were very aware of what I told you, so you didn't fall into the pits that I warned you about the water holes. But in the last 20 years, I have continued my, what you call, particularly my spiritual journey. And in that sense, you keep your distance. You're content. You're not I have always been curious what's behind the curtain. I've always looked and said, okay, why is this or why is that? And that journey for me has never stopped. But as you guys grew up, you kind of kept the distance and
so
don't
you say
go there.
You suggest that we're not hungry enough on our Christian journey. So we're suggesting.
Yeah. Because there's good stuff. And that's the part that's the most important in the end. Because ultimately, you have enough money, that's okay. You have enough kids, and that's okay. So you have that all sorted out. But our spiritual journey is the one that really, really matters. And to not be curious and eager and wanting to search for what is truth.
So I'm curious about, what it was like when you went from what they call teenage years, be 13, right? And then into being a man. Nowadays, the saying kind of says that, before there was no teenage years, and now we have 10 years of teenage years.
Yeah.
what would that transition look like, when you're 13 to 20, how that looked like what was that age group, what were you doing, and were those teenage years pretty short? It's wondering.
No, they were forever. They were the hardest years of my life. Yeah, I never really talked about that very much, but they were not much fun. I was raised in a good home, good parents, but yeah, they really didn't guide you much in that sense. But you guys, I believe you had good years during the teenage years, and not because of what I did, it's because you guys just had adventure to no end, I believe. And I really felt that you guys had a good time during those years, because you weren't in school, you're working hard, you're sharing notes, you're hunting rabbits or doing whatever, whatever was on, or you went skiing or skating or whatever, those sort of things. And of course, we all live parents always live their dreams through their children. And that's what I was doing, like the part that was really hard for me was just not having a direction when I was a teenager. When I got married, about age 22, I think, like all that stuff went away. Now I had a purpose. Now I had a direction, had a good wife, and, how to make a living, raise a family, all that kind of stuff. And those years were beautiful. They had a purpose, and really, really glad for those years. That's been perfect ever since. I'm 74 now, and age 22 to 74, my married life has been wonderful.
You touched on truth, right?
Yeah,
a little bit ago, and I think we have a pretty broad sense of what truth is in our society.
Everybody has their own
truth.
Yeah,
we have a philosophy that you can create your own truth.
Yeah,
right. And you do a lot of reach out to people, so I'm sure you hear that a lot. Like, each person has their own truth and that kind of stuff. You seem not to have the same philosophy, and that there is some foundation of truth in life. Could you speak a bit about that? Maybe the spiritual side, but also in like natural side, like just regular life. What does that look like?
Yeah, like financially in life. Just start with the natural side for you guys. I try to explain to you. I only had to explain it once. I explained numbers, okay? How expensive a car was. A car would cost $6, $7, $8 an hour to own a car. So you explain that to you guys. And if you're making $10 an hour and 7 of them are going to your car, well, I don't know. You guys didn't. I had you convinced. You weren't going to throw all your money away.
Yeah, I actually do remember you specifically going through with us and say, okay, here's depreciation, here's interest, here's all the different numbers, and you would ask us to put the numbers down.
Yeah.
You say, what would you consider? Okay, the car's going to cost X.
Yeah.
What's the price of the car? X. What would you consider the fair interest rate? X. And you would work through those numbers, the numbers we actually applied and gave to you, right? And then you would calculate it up and say, here it is. And that's right. We gave you the numbers. Yeah. It wasn't how the numbers manipulated. So yeah, you're right.
And typically we kept an extra old beater car around or two, and you guys can borrow them for the gas.
No, you didn't. You actually charge us rent on it.
That's way too. Sorry, I lied.
We had a price. It was like 30 cents a kilometer. That was our price.
It wasn't that. It was 30 cents a mile. No, that's right. That's right. But again, it was way, way, way less money. But you guys understood that. That's a truth, okay? But there's a lot of truths in life that are just. That's one of the easier ones. But in all aspects, the treating people right and all those, what in the Bible teachings and so on, they're gift from God, and
why those teachings? Why do you believe those teachings are truth?
Well, first of all, you have to. Everybody has to decide what set of instructions in life are correct. Is it the woke stuff that's being taught today, or is it the Christian teaching, or is it Muslim teaching, or whatever? Whatever you subscribe to is your truth. But not every truth ends up in the same outcome, and you have to determine what is the outcome of each truth. See, in our life, the Christian belief was clear to us. In Jesus' teaching, turn the other cheek and all those simple things. Matthew 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Mount, we have the simple things in life that Jesus taught. And those are the kind of things that we try to teach our children and to live ourselves. But the one thing we did is we never apologized for our beliefs, okay? A lot of Christian parents tend to feel bad that their kids are being prevented from having as many privileges as life would offer, and so on. I never felt bad. I thought it was a real privilege to be raised in a Christian home and to raise my kids in a Christian home. And we didn't apologize when we raised our kids, saying, but this is what we have to do. No, it's what we get to do. It was a privilege living a Christian life and to make a living and to sharing with others and those kind of things. Never apologize to your children for being poor or this or that. We didn't have any money to speak of when you were young. We were struggling financially, but we never talked about that. We just we talked about the privilege that we have, and it was that, and it was self-fulfilling in that way.
So if you would short form the whole idea of that there is some level of truth in Christianity for a life you're going to live, how would I go and understand that this actually is truth? How would I understand that the teachings that are in the Bible are good for me in a day-to-day natural life even? How would I go about trying to define that actually is a truth?
Well, first of all, we have a Bible with 66 books in it. But what we forget to think about, and I wasn't raised that way either, but the concept is that 2/3 of that, the Old Testament, is a history book, a beautiful history book. It's interesting to read, heroes of the faith. We have Daniel and David and all those people in the life well lived. And that same God works with us today. But we are under Jesus' teachings, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That is our instruction today, the teachings of Jesus. And those teachings are really how we raised our family. But if you actually think about it, of all the teachings that Jesus ever gave us, can you name one that you wish wasn't on the list? And there isn't any. They're all good, constructive teachings. And if we are doing them, not only do we have a good life now, we have a good life forever.
So you would suggest reading them, understanding them, and understanding if I would apply that, what would the outcome be? Is that what you would suggest?
Yeah, but read those 4 Gospels, and actually they're kind of four stories of the same story. Okay, but read, particularly Luke and Matthew, they're the simpler ones, and read them and say, do I want this? And if you do, it's not half measures. You don't pick, even being kind is a good thing. But if you do the whole list, your life is truly beautiful.
So you would suggest reading it?
Yep.
And testing it?
Yep.
To see what results it would give in my life?
Absolutely.
And apply it and see if it works.
And look at people that are doing it and see what their lives look like. It's beautiful. Really? Yeah. They're like, that works. Jesus taught, and that's the simple teaching.
What other things truths that you would suggest in your life that you've experienced that would debunk where our society has gone to in the last 20 years?
Okay, when I was a kid, heart attack and cancer were the 2 big concerns. Today it's mental health and suicide and depression. Those are the big things. That's what our society has come up with today. But we're looking for better pills and better this and less drugs and all that stuff. But that's not the answer. The answer is what we had, which is Jesus, simple living, honest living. It's really, really simple. But that's not what people want. People have come up with a new set of truths that are completely different, and Jesus is, in their mind, today's society don't want to talk about it. It's not even okay to talk about it, but yet it still works.
You had struggles with the leadership of the church for many years, and I want to know a little bit about the story when you said enough was enough, and we have a testimonial time at that point in time where people get up and speak and communicate and share their testimony, that kind of stuff. And you were one of the last speakers of the whole church convention, and you basically got up, and I don't understand the whole story because I was, I think 13 or something like that. I'm curious to know, what that looked like, why you made those decisions at that point in time, what got you to that spot, what you even said, if you remember what you said, and what that journey's been a little bit like since then. Curious.
Yeah. About a few weeks earlier than that, I asked myself one day, if Jesus was on earth, would he be part of this group? I said, of course not. I said, well, why am I here? So really the problem is, and that hasn't changed. I personally haven't belonged to a church group for 24 years. Another really difficult step I took was when for Glenn, the oldest one, when he finished grade 8, his marks weren't very good. And I said to him, I says, if those marks don't improve, but then in grade 10, you are not doing this anymore. You got a job to go to. And so at the end of grade 10, the marks were worse instead of better. And so that was over. And it was really interesting how everybody pig-piled on me on that one. Said, they can't do that. You're cutting his legs off and all that kind of stuff. But being clear on that's really, really important. To me, when values are clear, decisions making is easy. And that was really clear. I never liked the idea of kids staying warm for the winter, just go to school. It's a social event. Even Elon Musk says today, he says, you don't go to school to learn. You can learn that on the computer. You go for social. And he says, I get that. He says that people want to spend a bit of time getting their social life in order. And that's okay. So go to school for the social, but don't worry about it for the schooling. But then I had a problem. The next kid was a good kid. His marks were okay. So what do I do here? So anyways, we finally come up with a plan that said, if you want to stay in school, that's okay. But you got to tell me why. Keeping warm for the winter isn't a good enough reason. But that was really hard, but it was hard in a way, but it wasn't. But it was clear but it was nobody I've ever met had that opinion about school. And anyways, none of our kids ever got to grade 11. They all left. Some got grade 10, some didn't. They all went to work. They chose a different path. And, with a little bit of guidance, they were all financially set in a few years. And that's not the point in life is money, but it puts that to bed. And once you're financially set, you just put that aside. You can go to work.
So today in modern schools, are they any different than when you went to school or when we went to school, or what is today? What's the change here now?
If I was living in Europe, our kids would have gone to school. Because in Europe, they actually go to school for a purpose. After grade 8, they go to, one guy goes to carpentry school, and the other guy goes to welding school, and the other guy's going to be a mathematician. You know what I mean? They all go to the school that they need to go to. But our school, they're basically learning, like I went to finished grade 13, and it was horrible and hard and useless. When I got my first job, I couldn't do anything with that. It was just pointless. And that was really, really hard, because I had nothing practical in my life. And so I really was hoping not to afflict you with that. When you're 16 and don't know anything, that's okay. When you're 21 and don't know anything, that's not very good.
So with our culture now, we teach a lot about this LGBTQ, trans stuff, all that kind of stuff. Would you put your kids through school even today? Like, would they go to the public school system still today, or what would you do?
I think the biggest, I think it can be done, but it's really sad. It's really, really a burden. But you see the kids spend of their whole year, they spend 20% in school and 70% and the other 80% at home. You can deprogram them. You can teach them what needs to be taught. You can teach them good values, and that's what we did. They taught about a lot of stuff that that didn't make a lot of sense when you guys went to school, but you just told them the truth and told them our truth. Our truth was the Christian truth, and the Christian truth and the school truth weren't the same, but we promoted the Christian truth, and our kids accepted that, and yeah, I think we got along okay. I don't really feel bad about that, and I don't feel bad about your lack of education. What I would recommend today, you got to be there. You got to be there when the kids get off the bus. You got to be there with them, for them, and answer all their questions and answer them honestly, and life will be good.
What about you wouldn't be concerned about the polluting of their minds so that...
No, because you see, even Jesus himself, he was raised in a town called Nazareth, which wasn't a good town. People knew that. He could have been raised in Bethlehem, where he was born. And if he was raised in Bethlehem, it would have been a nice sheltered town, 5 miles out of Jerusalem. They would have been able to church to no end and all this kind of stuff. But Jesus was raised in a rough town, and his parents did a good job. You know, it's interesting. You know, you sit to see both sides that way. It isn't the way the wind blows, it's the way you tip your sail that matters. And that's always the case.
I remember when I was young, we would go to grandma and grandpa's up at Oma's. Would they question you because everybody carrying stuff in and out, and they'd be wondering what you're doing, you're not carrying anything, right? And your comment, I remember back to them, was, I carry the responsibility.
You're very good. That was a joke, but yes, yeah, no, that's right. And that was a joke, though. You know, it comes back from an old story about the guy just getting on the train, and his wife's got burdens, and the kids all got burdens, and the conductor says to him, "Hey, buddy, what are you carrying?" "Oh, I carry the responsibility." That was a favorite joke of mine. But literally, I was behind the scenes. I did my work. I did my share of stuff. I never saw Mom hurting. I made sure that when you guys were there, you did clean the table and did the dishes and all that stuff. But if that wasn't there, I helped. Right. You know, I was there for her.
We live in a society now that we have a lot of this feminism and that kind of stuff. Those kind of comments wouldn't go over real well either today.
No, you're right. But feminism isn't Christianity. So we can't do anything with it anyway. If that's where we want to go, that's not what Jesus taught. Men are men, women are women. Jokingly, I say that any woman that wants to be like a man doesn't have any ambition, because women work a lot harder than men do, and I admire them to no end. And
these kids have been raised a lot of times single mothers.
Yeah,
in the town.
That's hard. Yeah, no kidding.
They don't have more is caught than taught. That's what you always tell us.
Yeah.
Right? And they don't have that role models, the leadership, no men in their lives that know how to show up for them. Where do you tell them to go? What do you tell them to do?
Yeah, the answers are still in the Gospels. Jesus, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, that gives you a sample of what Jesus taught. As much as you can go towards that. Life is discipline, eh? It's discipline. It's really hard, if you have no financial discipline, you have no money. If you have no moral discipline, you have no family. If you have no spiritual discipline, you'd have no God. You know what I mean? If you're the God in your own life, I mean, that's tough. There is no alternative. But there were people in Bible days like Mary Magdalene who came from a really bad spot, and things went good for her, and it all turned out well. But you had to have a discipline. You had to change your life. And Jesus taught something's on my mind a lot. He says, take up your cross daily and deny yourself. Take up your cross daily and follow me. But that works in all aspects of life. As a family man, you deny yourself, take up your cross daily, your burden, and follow me. And a financial side, you deny yourself. If you don't spend everything you make, you deny yourself, you take up your burden and follow me. But in spiritually the same way, it's if you don't deny yourself and do what needs doing, it's all in direct relationship to doing, of serving. You have to serve in every aspect of life. And that's where that's where I live my life today. I'm still serving. I do that's every day. I'm working hard to do what I need to do.
So you say deny yourself. Does that mean you avoid all pleasures of this life, or what does that actually look like?
No, I'll give you a simple example. Food, for example. I enjoy food more now that I'm disciplined. I eat less, but I enjoy it more. And in all aspects of life, if you live a disciplined life, even, exercise. If you sit on the couch all day, that's not good discipline.
You
But
want to
if
enjoy
you,
the couch.
yeah, no, but the thing is, but that's what you either choose to stay active, or you suffer the consequences. In spiritual life, same thing. Every aspect of life, family life, if you ignore your family, that doesn't go well. Like it's discipline, and your willingness to do what you should be doing. Even, and I don't like to uphold Elon Musk. He has got his own faults, but he was raised by a single mom, and he learned the discipline of doing stuff. Okay, not because it was easy, but he just learned to discipline himself. He worked and worked and worked and worked, and single mom. Think about it. And he didn't have no privilege.
Wonderful. So if you dig deeper in that ideology of discipline, as a young kid that's playing video games or watching these type of videos and spending hours flipping through their screen, what does it look like to be disciplined? They're there spending hours. What happens? Like, get off the screen, throw the phone away. What are we doing here?
Well, like Jordan Peterson says, people originally came to him and says, I want to change the world. How can I do that? And he said, did you make your bed this morning? And he says, no. Well, he says, start with that. And when you've learned to make your bed, you come back and see me. Then we'll maybe sweep the floor. And if you can't get your personal life in order, you're going to help the world solve their problems. And it all starts with number one. If we cannot help others unless when I was raising you guys, I had to be the example. I had to be. A lot more is caught than taught. If I was not living a responsible life, you guys would have laughed at me.
Right.
But I hope I never provide any excuse for your own bad behavior. Do you know what I mean? Like, I hope I was living what I was teaching.
One of the biggest things that I've noticed in the younger men, teenagers that are struggling the most, and I dig deep into their behaviors, the biggest thing is they've continued to choose the easiest choice in that moment.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem I've noticed. That
has never worked, though. I mean, that's been like that for thousands of years, though, way before all this other stuff. People, kids were raised in days past, and they would learn the drinking habits of their parents and all this kind of stuff, and have nothing and living a life of, like a tough, when the gospel came to the coal miners, these people were living horrible lives. And when, and people like John Wesley and those kind of people, when they brought the gospel to them, these people cleaned up their act and got to work and quit carrying on and drinking. And even Wesley, when he first started preaching to the people about alcohol, he says, nothing wrong about alcohol, he said, but he realized that these people they had to quit the alcohol, not because it was illegal for Christians, but they couldn't manage it. He says, no more alcohol, zero, and how much alcohol did we have in the house? We never had any. And did we suffer because of the lack of that? No, not at all. And is it illegal for Christians to have alcohol? No, but it's just stupid. All of this is one more trap to get into. Deny yourself, take up your cross. Like, there's so much of the stuff around you that, lots of things that we didn't have at our home that a lot of other people did. But, it's just that, less is more, and a simple life is, the Mennonites, they actually live a simple life, but they make that a Christian way of thinking, and I disagree with that also. Just doing things a backward way isn't necessarily Christian. We can live a normal life, but discipline our own behavior within that.
Right. And is it possible now, though, because of the ease of life and because of our government and that kind of stuff, that these kids, these young adults, they can live in this snooze button for a longer period of times and not feel the repercussions of that behavior? Is that what the problem?
It's so hard, though. When did you learn to work, David?
I mean, I didn't know what I was learning when I was learning, but I was probably learning when I was 10,
Yeah. And it's so hard to start learning when you're 20. It's so hard because when you were learning to work, you were actually 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, and you were you were doing dishes, you were doing all those things, and if they weren't done, they weren't done. You still had them to do. You know what I mean? There was no, okay, well, we'll do them for you. No, none of that. And you knew that, and that's how life works. And if you're not raised that way, it's really hard. But you just have to put the hammer down and say, okay, I'm gonna make my bed, sweep the floor, do all the things I need to do, and make work your friend instead of your enemy. And in life, you feel so good about yourself and, cleaning up your act.
Yeah. Interesting. So the atheist out there, this ideology of that you find your own truth. I mean, the devil offered Eve that she'd be as a god, deciding right from wrong. So we have that in our own nature, right? To say, hey, I can choose. I'm good. I'm all powerful. All that kind of stuff. So the atheists out there, what's are they what's your answer to them? You can't really learn until you're searching, or what?
Well, if you're really okay, if atheism is your belief and your truth, and you're happy with that, then do that. But it doesn't. But you're going to miss out on. See, God made us for a purpose, and that purpose is to walk with Him. And they say, well, I don't believe there is a God. Well, that's up to you. But that doesn't make it go away. And all people, no matter. All throughout history for the last thousands of years, if there were a group of people living on an island somewhere, they were always serving a god. But yet you don't see the chickens and the cows or the monkeys gathering around in a circle worshiping some item. We all have a God part in our life, realizing we are made that way. We have a spot in our heart that says, there is a God here. There is something special. And we
So you're saying, not to interrupt you, but that you're saying is that the atheists still believe in a God.
Yeah, they don't want to, but it's bugging them.
So the world seems not to be in, as far as values, not in a great spot, especially North America.
It's always been that way.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes through up and down.
So what you suggest that the future looks like? What's the ebbs and flows? What's
people
things 20
choose.
years from now?
Oh, when you have luxury and sex, working is an option in our society. If you don't work or whatever, you don't have to do anything, and people still feed you. But as long as we have luxury, people go. Life gets worse, and when times are hard and people have to work. My parents were teenagers in the Second World War in Europe. Time was tough, and that made them, helped to make them grow and be strong and so on. And I was raised from an immigrant family here in Canada. That was skinny because they didn't have a lot to go on. And I tried to, my hope was to raise our kids on an immigrant mindset. And to a large extent, we did that. And but if you keep it simple, keep it hungry, that works out okay.
Yeah.
It was good.
That journey, you adopted six children, in 2 different times. Oh, would you recommend it? In what situation would you recommend it? Other people looking on.
Well, we weren't looking to adopt. We were fostering. We were just, we already had enough kids, so we didn't need any more. But then we were foster parenting, and lo and behold, 2 different times we inherited 3 kids that were in our home already. And that worked out really, really nice. I really enjoyed the kids, and again, kept it simple. And by those times, we could afford to have more things, but we don't do that. We still don't live that way. Our house is still simple. We don't have any. We just have a big toy box full of junk, and that's it. They have their own fun.
Yeah. And do you recommend people to go into foster, adopting, that kind of stuff?
I recommend anybody and everybody to do something for others. That's all we were doing. If you have a purpose, life is wonderful. So bringing more people into your home, kids, old folks, doesn't matter. Adopt, doesn't matter. We weren't looking for adopting. We were just looking to help a little. And that worked out wonderful.
So men don't feel adequate enough, I don't think, a lot of times now, for many reasons. I think part of the reason they aren't adequate to get married.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter?
No. I told you, it's a kind of a joke, but if a guy's, what do they say, if a guy's 25 years old and he meets a really neat girl, he should ask her what her name is, and then he said, "What's your last name?" And he says, and after 20 minutes, you still like her. He says, you should propose to her, and I'm just kind of joking. But the point is, if you find somebody decent, get married, figure it out, done. Just done. And be responsible. Be responsible. Number one, for anybody and everybody, is do something. And the other one is make today right. If you get today right, do that enough times, you got a week right, and so on. But just do something. If you do nothing, if you have lots of plans mean nothing. Do something. And that's how I live my life. And I have never met anybody I would ever trade places with. Fascinating.
And what do you recommend for these gentlemen that are looking for a woman? What are they looking for in the wife?
You look for somebody honest if you can. You have to have somebody who's honest.
What does that mean?
That means they could have warts, and that's all fine. We all have warts. We're all rather imperfect. But honest means that you're, just that. Somebody that's not playing games. For example, there's lots of guys that would love to have a good woman, and lots of women would love to have a good man. Just kind of meet them. Done. It's just like the employment circle. There's all kinds of employers looking for good staff and all kinds of people looking for a good job. How come they don't meet? And the same thing applies in marriage.
Why don't they meet?
Right?
Why don't they meet?
They don't see themselves correctly. If you realize that you got warts and she's got warts or whatever, you know what I mean? Big deal. Drive on. Life is a risk. It is really, really important, I believe, is that if a guy should not treat his wife like a queen because she might accept the crown, and a guy shouldn't treat her man like a king because he might accept the crown. Because if one of them owns the crown, it's not much fun anymore. I believe that in a marriage, he should always do what's best for them, and that be the husband, wife, children, whatever. And she should always do what's best for them. Don't ever put your husband or wife on a pedestal. No, it's not okay.
So how should the man show up prior to marriage? How should that man be? What should the woman look for in the man? What does that look like?
Honesty, hard work, both sides. Yeah, willing to work and honest and humble. Yeah, but I know you can't get everything. But if there's dishonesty and a pervasive dishonesty, it's not going to work. Because if you're lying to each other, that's not going to ever turn out right. Yeah, I met a pastor one time who married a gal that was handicapped. His wife had left him, and this lady was handicapped. And I thought, that's odd, eh? It's a guy who's got all the skills and whatnot. And I thought, And yet I've met them both really nice people. And I thought that was really novel because, you would think that, his IQ is 120 and hers is 60. You know what I mean? As a simple example. But it was a good marriage because they weren't playing games with each other. Do you know what I mean? Like, he provided direction and she provided kindness and did the work and that kind of stuff. And it was, totally mismatched from an IQ standpoint. I thought it was really neat. I don't know. There was something really neat about that. And opposites are really kind of important. Values have to be the same, but some people are horse people and some people are cat people. That don't matter at all, or whatever. But what's important is that their values are the same, have the same desires for a future direction together.
We talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but if you're to summarize it, why do you think, for the most part, your sons are successful financially?
Oh, because it's easy, simple. Just go to work, make it happen.
Some people work hard, but they don't make money, and they don't save money, and they don't have money.
Yeah, I know, but managing money is, they learned that when they were 10. But not everybody's that way, eh? Like we have kids that aren't so much that way.
I remember when I was probably 13, you would teach about capital gains.
Yeah.
And it was like some of these simple basic tax rules that, stuck with me. I don't think, obviously you don't teach that stuff in school, right?
No, and I'm not that, and all what you call the financial tricks in life that I've tried, none of them worked out that well. But just for my own self, just doing the kind of things that I like to do and being constructive, that turned out okay. But my cleverness has never got me very far. But just being reliable and responsible and working hard, that worked out really well. But it was I never got very far with my cleverness. I was wrong on most of that. I never learned to game the system.
And you have different times in your life and different stages. How would you recommend young men focusing on those different stages, in their 20s, the 30s, 40s? How would you spend your time? You have family, you have faith, you have fitness, you have finance. You have a lot of things you got to figure out, short periods of time.
Fitness is a real easy one. Find a job that means you got to, like a house framer, okay, for a young guy. Okay, you don't have to go to the gym afterwards. You know what I mean? Find a job that does both. You get a job like a simple thing. I have a few kids and grandkids have done that and stuff. But once you do have a job like that, you got lots of money, you got lots of work, lots of exercise, and you got a clear head and all that thing, and a good place to work, and no women to distract you, and all this kind of stuff. It's good, healthy spot. That's a simple example. Those are good places to be.
So what would you focus on in your 20s?
Hard work, getting married, having family, getting God right. Yeah.
In 30s?
Yeah. There's an adage I like, and it says that when the airplane is sitting on the tarmac and the controller says, okay, you're good for takeoff, how much throttle does the pilot give the plane?
Full throttle.
Yeah. And he gets to 30,000 feet. What does he do?
Probably about half.
Yeah. And that's how you have to have life too, eh? You have to know enough to work really hard. And if you had to give it half throttle on the tarmac, you never would have got off the tarmac. And that's what a lot of people do in life. They just sit on the tarmac all day, idling the engine. And that's not going to work. You're not going to get anywhere. But if you get to 30,000 feet, it's time to throttle back and smell the roses and look at other aspects of life a little more.
So what you should be doing at 40? That'd be the time you're half throttle?
Yeah. But you invite other, what you call opportunities into your life. Adopt some kids, bring in an oldie, do something, whatever your thing is, deliver Bibles, I don't know, whatever's, but it has to make sense, eh? Like activity, don't ever mistake activity for accomplishment. It all has to have a purpose. We're meant to serve, and that means do something, not just, shop with woodworking and who cares, it doesn't make any difference, that kind of stuff. You gotta do something that has merit, has purpose, and we have to keep reinventing ourselves. Every business has to reinvent themselves. Every family should reinvent themselves, have a purpose. In our home, it just kind of happened, but we really weren't thinking about that. But you just kind of kept reaching and looking, and God was good.
Mm-hmm. So is that the problem, that people are not reinventing themselves, finding purposes and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, really big problem. Yeah.
So what's typical at 50 and 60, and what
they coast? They quit thinking. Like life is just putting in hours, putting in the years till you die, and you go do this and that. But that's not really what life is about. Is you got to do something. What have you done for others? What have you done for God? What have you done for society? Whatever it is, you have to have a purpose. Pampering yourself is not what Jesus asked us to do, and there's no privilege in that at all. It's just terrible. I'm so glad that I have to be somewhere else tomorrow, and got work to do. So glad for that. So grateful for that. I'm actually, every year is the best year of my life. Fascinating. I just can't believe how privileged I am. And everything comes clearer to me. I find that really I'm really enjoying that.
Right. And you're 70, 74.
Yeah.
And so would you suggest that other 70-year-olds should be doing what you're doing?
No. Everybody should invent their own life. No. Nobody has ever, no, not at all. The opposite. Everybody has to reinvent himself.
How do you get clarity on what that looks like?
Yeah, but talk to God, whatever, talk to your spouse, I don't know. But I never, ever dreamt I'd be doing what I'm doing today 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. But I'm so glad I got something to do that actually makes sense. So grateful for that, and not everybody has that privilege, but I think it can be. I do believe. I believe we're as busy as we want to be and as constructive as we want to be. And throughout history, all throughout history, even the guy that invented Kentucky Fried Chicken, apparently he was my age when he invented that stuff, or whatever. It was not that's just a worldly game, but people, the success early in life, some late in life, but success is serving others. And that's the Christian motto, but that's really that's what makes us happy and healthy and structural.
Do you ever have fear of failing?
No, not anymore.
Did you?
Yeah, there was times in life that, but I had a bigger fear, and the bigger fear was that if I didn't try this, I would be less forgiving of myself if I didn't try it than if I tried and failed. And I got lots of scars and lots of things that didn't work out, lots of them. And, in every aspect of life, I didn't get everything right raising our kids. We've had a lovely marriage, but, it hasn't always gone perfect. And, but financially, I've made some big blunders and whatnot. And spiritually, it took me a long time to get to a pleasant place.
Would you have more fear of failing or more of a fear of not succeeding, not taking the risk?
No, my biggest fear for a long time is if I'm doing things out of pride or something like that. If I'm doing the right thing for the wrong reason, that's bad. You got to be careful. What is my motive? Because if your motives are wrong, you want to do something to look good. No, please don't do that. Don't ever do that. But that's happened so easy, that's by far my biggest fear now.
Interesting.
In more recent years, if we're doing something to impress or to impress others or God or whatever, no, that's horrible. Horrible.
Well, thanks for coming out, Dad. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
This is Show Up Podcast, Show Up Nation, and we want to help young men, young women to understand a little bit about, a journey through life. And you're on the other side of life and went through a lot, and it's beautiful to hear the story. And so I'm hoping that others can learn and grow from it and get something from it, right? And that's it. If you like it, subscribe. If you like, comment down below. And if you have other topics you'd love us to talk about, let us know. That'd be appreciated. Thank you.